Hey guys, David Vos here. Well, it's really a nice day here in Alabama. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Guys, remember we were talking about, well, a couple of videos back, we did the video on Gelago, the Tartarians. Well, the point of that video, the big picture, was that we got this big city. And it looks big. And it looks magnificent. Sculpted. Ornamental. The architecture does not look like anything we would have done here in America in 1893. I mean, you're going to have a world fair to present to the world your new technologies. You know, Edison and Tesla and electric lights and motors. You're not going to be displaying Greek, Athenian, Constantinople, domes and pyramids from ancient days. Yeah, there were that type of building and architecture in New York, but those were burned too. And yeah, there were some of that kind of architecture in other places like St. Louis. We've seen them. San Diego. San Francisco was burned to the ground all around about the same time. And yeah, they had these Greek pillars and kind of Roman architecture and Athens, and it's all kind of mixed. It's hard to know. There seems to be pillars and domes, and there seems to be some sort of fixation with these ancient cities in the 1890s and 1900. They were all burned down. There's some fixation with Egypt. Not just with Rome and the Athenian architecture, but you seem to have, it seems to be like these monuments, like the Washington Monument. They put one everywhere. These pillars. And we talked about those pillars. They are definitely commemorating ancient pharaohs. We know that the Ptolemies from Greece went down and married Cleopatra line, which is from the African line. And we've talked about, you never hear this anywhere. Nobody understands this, but we talked about it a lot yesterday. If you really watch that, it's an hour and a half, explaining why the two lines, one from Cain, which was a woman, Naamah, who married Noah, which is the line of Seth. But I'm not going to go into that today, but this architecture from Egypt is obviously epitomized with pyramids and these pillars or monuments, as we call them. I don't know, these ziggurats. By the way, the ziggurat may have come originally from, the Anunnaki who lived in a house called Ikur. I had a dream about that the other night. I woke up and the Lord was telling me Ikur, and that was standing out in my mind. Ikur is the original pyramid, kind of like the Tower of Babel. It's the ziggurat, Ikurat, and it was where the gods dwelled, and there were gardens, and this was a beautiful city. But obviously there were more ancient ones because Atlantis had these architectures and so forth. So all of this architecture is really coming from Atlantis. But we have this architecture in all the most ancient civilizations. Of course, we see these pyramids and monuments in Egypt. And the Bible says in Isaiah chapter 19 that it will be a witness, a testimony at the border and in the midst thereof in Egypt for the Lord. But we find them pyramid structures in Peru. They, I believe, are in North America, but those are all gone now. There's probably one right down here, a few hundred feet from my house, which I showed you the other day. It's an ancient mound now. It's that old. I believe it dates back thousands of years. But anyway, if you can go to Egypt, you can go to China, you can go to Peru, you can go all over the world, and they have these pyramid-like structures. Because this is the architecture of something far, far in the distant past They were making it as a pattern of something. And the only original one that stood at the beginning of civilization was the one at Khufu in Egypt. But that was one that withstood the flood. It dates before the flood. And so the Anunnaki, who is Noah, Anu, his 3 sons and 3 daughters, or their wives, made up the 8 that are the 8 Anunnaki. So we talked about all that. Well, now, I'm going to get to something very important. I think I found a way to prove who built the city in 1893. We've got pictures of that's called Chilago, and it's on maps dating back 1500. Right? We've got maps with the city on it. And some kind of different map. It doesn't even look, there's no Great Lakes. And this big gorge goes down, and I imagine there are various cities named on there. The only one we have pictures of, evidently, is this one that's called Chicago, which we have verification that is the original Chilago from paperwork that was written. People were talking about it, and so it's been verified. That's the ancient Chilago, and we've seen pictures in 1893. They say they built it real quickly out of plaster, and then they burned it all down. Well, what I wanted to do after I watched that video, I wanted to find some literal proof that we could use. I mean, we had plenty of proof, just, gobs of pieces of evidence that we showed. I mean, why would they burn them all down? There's no way they could have built them that quick and then just burned them all down. This is ridiculous. But there's lots of little things we've already mentioned, like why would they, if they're having a world fair, right, to expose or to an expose to show what they're going to be, the new, world order, and they're having a reset, so they burn everything down and they start over. Well, why would they build to demonstrate what the new world's going to be like, this old architecture? Because New York and Chicago now is glass, and they look a lot like those monuments, don't they? It's like every one of these skyscrapers that we see in the world today, in all these cities, look like Washington monuments, basically, but made out of glass. I don't know if that's a coincidence. But when you look at the world today, you see buildings, glass buildings in China. You see them in Paris, right? France. You see them in Russia. You see them although Russia's got some odd looking architecture, that's a little different. That looks, the Kremlin, right? That's a little different. It's kind of more like the Constantinople, the mosques and the Muslim look. Then you've got this other kind of look that's more Athenian. And there seems to be a lot of mixing and matching, but the Western is more Athenian and the Eastern Empire is more Islamic or Muslim or, I don't know, old world that goes back to maybe Persian. These Persian kind of architecture. But one thing they all have in common is they got to drag these monuments up from Egypt they got a little pyramid at the top of this 4-sided, what they call a phallic symbol, an ichor or a ziggurat or a monument that we're calling them today. And they took the literal monuments from Egypt and put some in the Vatican. They took them to Istanbul. They've taken them to, well, there's one in the park in New York. Actually, that particular one was created to honor Cleopatra. Now, who is this Cleopatra? She's got her own ziggurat, right? This monument that honors her. Well, you got to be pretty important to get one of those because Washington has his own monument in Washington, D.C. called the Washington Monument. And he's like this bigger than life figure, like a goddess, like a divine being standing there in Washington, D.C. And sure enough, there's a baptismal font, right? This rectangle bath pool. And at the other end of that is this Capitolium from, the same word that we find in Rome that's got this little dome and all this architecture that goes back to Athens, Greece. Well, that's where the Ptolemy line came from. In Athens, right? This Alexander And that's that original line from Judah that went to Troy, and it made all these royal bloodlines, and Annius, and then to Romulus and Pompilius, and down to Caesar, Julius Caesar. These are royal bloodlines from the tribe of Judah, from Danis, who was the son of Zerah, who was the son of Judah. And this goes all the way to Ireland. Now, we're getting too deep here, but I'm pulling all this together to say that this architecture has some sort of meaning. And I want to find out who really did build that city that we call Chicago. Right? We have pictures of this amazing architecture in 1893, and then they just burned it down in 1894. And they burned down this statue called the Statue of the Republic. That was the largest statue in the world, next, almost as big as the Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty was given by the French. The Statue of the Republic was also supposedly given by the French. But we're gonna take a little look at that thing, because they also had one of these monuments in Chicago. And then all of a sudden they burned it down. Well, they didn't. Here's the interesting thing. They didn't burn down that monument in Chicago in 1893. They didn't burn it down. They took it down. And they took it somewhere, and they said they took it to New York. So I was wondering, well, is that the same one that they put in New York then? And it's there in the park there in New York? Is that the same one dedicated to Cleopatra? And but regardless, whether that's the same one or not, I mean, I'm a little suspicious, because I saw this video on YouTube where they said that, no, that one came from Europe or Egypt or somewhere, and they put it on a boat. The Masons put it on a boat, in 1700 or whatever year they brought it over. And it was too big for the boat, and they had this story where they put a hole in the boat, and they laid it in the bottom of the boat, and the shaft of this, Cleopatra's monument, her pillar, is sticking out of the boat. There's a big hole in the boat. And they had to, solder it, or that's what they said. I don't know what they're talking about. They had to fill the hole, plug it so it wouldn't leak, and then they brought it over on a boat, and they say that it started sinking, and they lost this Cleopatra's pillar in the ocean. And then they claim that they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring it up from the ocean, and then they finally got it over here. Well, that's a likely story. First of all, what kind of idiots would put a big old thing like that in a boat that looks like the Columbus is one of those type of boats, right? With the Santa Maria or whatever, But why wouldn't you put it on a flat barge and tow it? And what kind of a boat? Who in the world would put a hole in their boat? None of that makes any sense. So I'm thinking that they're lying and they didn't bring it over. That's just a big story. There's always telling you stories about oh yeah, how did Tesla get all this information? Oh, well, he was just a genius. He just figured out, free electricity and alternating current and time machine. And it's just this crazy guys, figured out anti-gravity machines and the telephone and the lights and the motors and everything. He's so smart. Well, that's just a way for you to be told how in the world at the turn of the century, they just, voila, they had all these lights and somehow it just came out of nowhere. Well, some genius invented it. Some guy named Edison, right? And Tesla. Edison was a fool. He was a rich bastard. He had no knowledge. He's a ridiculous fool. Spent most of his time diddling the girls, whatever. Using his money like Elon. That's all he does. You think, oh, Elon's some genius. No, Elon's a billionaire, and all he does is he's got all these girlfriends. And one of them, the little Bavarian that he pretended to go to court with, this was a big distraction. And this whole thing about Twitter, you notice that he acted like he was backing out of that. Well, it was just because he couldn't pretend that he had it yet. He couldn't have it before the election, because then he could have swayed the election. Everybody was like, what are you talking about? Why don't you help us? Well, I don't own it yet. Oh, I'm not sure. Now, as soon as the election's over, oh yeah, now he's got it back and he's got it in control. And then they'll orchestrate their takeover and bring in Trump, right? I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, somebody's messing with us because they got DeSantis is going to run now. Well, that's going to split the Republican vote in two ways. But I'm getting off here. So I don't know. I don't know if they're setting us up for a civil war and Trump won't be able to win because they'll split the vote, or whether maybe one of them will decide, hey, freedom, or one of us runs, the other one stays home. You run later, Santos. Maybe if DeSantis really loves this republic and it's real and they're sincere and Trump's a really actual good guy and trying to help the people, then one of them will back out, because you can't have both of them running and get one of them elected. Not that I care listen, certainly I agree more with a lot of the things that Republicans are saying, except that I don't want a military and more police. But I understand why people would vote that way. And sane people wouldn't want anarchy in the streets and terrorists coming over the border. The only deal is that's all orchestrated just to get us to vote for Trump so they can have a one world government. So anyway, I digress. But you can just see all the manipulation, the red FLAGs. Well, they're not red. They're red too, but they're also FALSEs. But back to what we're saying. How can we find out why these boogaloo pretended to have this World Fair in New York and St. Louis and San Francisco, and then after the fair they burned everything down? But there's some oddities here. If indeed, which we can't believe that they built these whole cities in a few months anyway. And I can't believe they would burn them down anyway. So that to me is proof right there that something is wrong here. But we need some real proof. This is what I want to tell you today. I've got some real proof to show you that Chicago and therefore all these other places like San Francisco was burned down. And the buildings that were burnt down in New York were all this architecture like in Chicago. All of them. St. Louis. Now that's bad enough that they burned it down. And they didn't have time to build it. And they claimed it was plaster. And we showed you that video. I have the link in the video that's about Chicago, where you can watch a 2-hour video which shows proof conclusive. They're lying. They didn't just build it in a few months. Those cities were there. And they've taken all references to it out of our history books and stuff like this. But we do have some proof for it, and that video will prove it. But if you want some hardcore, just flat in your face proof right now, I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to show you not only who built it, the Chicago city. Well, we talked about that a couple of videos ago too. Right? We also have proof there in that video. But I'm going to give you some more proof. So, one is we were talking about this monument that was there. Well, if it was also built out of plaster and some sticks, then why did they carefully take it down and remove it and put it in New York? Right? A temporary fake monument of Cleopatra. Or, well, I don't know who the one in Chicago. You don't find out too much information. All they say is that, oh yeah, there's this picture and there's this monument or pillar thing and then there's this statue of the Republic. But they say they burned down the Statue of the Republic. The second largest, given to us as a gift from France. Right? Just like the Statue of Liberty. Well, just burn it down. We don't need that anymore. Sorry, France. We don't need that Statue of Liberty, right? Which is not just a gift. It is a bestowal of their grace from the ones who are bringing about the liberty. Right? It's the Masons. They're the ones. It's not France. Remember, I told you who these people in France were until, of course, they were taken over by the Illuminati. But in 1307, that was the good guys, and they murdered them and massacred them. And they went to Scotland and made the new Scotland in America, the Nova Scotia. And they made the new Francia. Because the people in France, Britain is in France. The northwestern corner of Britain, or France, is Britain. And that little area was called Armorica, and that's where they sailed from. But also, there was a group of them that went to, up in Scotland and, the Rosslyn Chapel, and you've heard all that, secret mysteries and stuff. There's people writing books about that too, like Dan Brown. Well, they're touching on some very important things, but they really don't understand the deep reality to these mysteries, what's really going on. Nobody's ever explained to us the two sides. Dan, going all the way back to biblical times, Dan, who will be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, who will bite the horse's heel, and the horse shall rear up and the rider shall fall backwards, which is the heraldry, the coat of arms of King Charles. And he has lineage back to Vladimir, the Dracula, the Goth, the vampire, the Batman, which is the lineage of this evil, wicked Dan, Odan, who had the black, the raven, right? The raven, what's that? Well, there's a lot that we're going to get into. My friend Joshua was looking into some of this. And he was telling me about this raven and how this, and how Odin's got the one eye. Well, all this can be traced back to Adon, Odin. And who is Adan? Abidan, who's got the key to the bottomless pit in Revelation. Abi, father, Adon, father Odin. And also Yahweh Adonai, that's his name, Yahweh Odin. So, yes, they worship the deity who was Ea, Enki, who is Enkidu, the wild man, as we said yesterday, who is Cain, who built the city of Enoch, who is the evil Phoenicians, the evil Enoch individuals that went to Tyre, that the book of Ezekiel in chapter 28 says is the lineage of Satan himself, who fell from heaven. So, I don't want to go into the raven and the eye patch and all of that today. We'll do more videos on that, and Joshua's going to be doing some information on that too, on his channel, the Sons of God Ministries. But what I want to get into is what I was looking into today. I want to find out, all right, so they got this city. We saw pictures of it in 1893. Beautiful architecture, but certainly is not glass buildings and modern architecture. They're going to reset a new world order and show us what they're going to do. No, they're demonstrating, they're exposing, and voila, take off the veil and expose this great architecture that they built in 6 months, right? That's what? That's the same architecture of Constantinople. That looks like Constantinople. Big domes and pillars and yeah, the same monuments going back to Egypt. And and there's the statue in the middle of the there's that that water course that we've got there in Washington, D.C. We've got the Washington Monument, got the rectangular water course, which is a baptismal font. All temples have that. And by the way, what is a temple? A temple is your body that the spirit dwells in. But what is the body? Well, these man-made temples were symbols and mysteries that explain the body. Not just your human body, but the whole body of the universe. It's math, matter, material, the science, how the whole structure manifests. It's the temple, the outer court. So that's what Washington, D.C. is. There's some people that came there and built a temple. And it's a replica of other people's temples. And it seems like there's somebody trying to infiltrate. Because when these bad guys came in, the Illuminati and Wesop, Adam Wesop, right? Who's in the tradition of Francis Bacon, same place, Bavaria. John Dee, Edward Kelly, they brought up demons, had orgies, come up with a theory to take over the world. They're up there in Bavaria. And they start coming down, and they're barbarians, they're murdering and killing, and they're going everywhere with their boats and the little serpent on their sail. Well, then they took over and massacred the Templars in 1307. Well, what were the Templars doing in France in 1307? And Paris? Well, because they owned France. This was Mary Magdalene. And I'm going to show you that they revered her. Yeah, they talk about her. They use the word Marianne. They use the word Martial. It's in their national anthems. All this stuff the original France goes back to the original history of the 72 that came on the boat with Mary Magdalene and the knights and all of this chivalry and all of this is coming from the good side, from Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And the history's there, but nobody wants to tell you much about it. You can read a book like Dan Brown or whatever, and he'll give you little bits and pieces, but he doesn't really know what he's talking about. Look, I would respect him for the work that he's done, except I don't believe in any of these. I think all these people are Bavarians, and they're just trying to twist and give you information that controlled opposition, like Alex Jones. It's just enough to make you think that somebody's talking the truth, but they never really get to the bottom of anything. You really see Alex Jones preaching Jesus Christ, telling you to go and believe in the Lord and love one another. And I mean, not really. It's more just conspiracies to make us think we're all exposing, oh, it's a flat earth now. You know, just crazy conspiracies that have nothing to do with reality. So there they were, 13. Why would they massacre then these Templars? Because they don't like them. And they wanted their money. They were reports they had all this gold. Well, it wasn't from, people are like, where'd they get all this gold, right? Well, because these were the most powerful, as I said, Peter Waldo owned 169 towns and cities and villages along the Rhone, beginning from Marseille, France, up to Montpellier. And if you want to know who the original church fathers, or I should say, the founding fathers were and what side they were on, remember Montpellier and Monticello? Thomas Jefferson, they revered this tradition. They had the Statue of Liberty from France, from the original Templars, and they displayed it, liberty and justice for all. Yeah, they rebuilt something that looks like Montpellier, and the Monticello and all of this stuff. They were avid. Oh, they revered all this stuff back to the French, back to Marseille, France, and Mary Magdalene and Jesus. Oh, and by the way, this is another really interesting, important point. Joseph Smith built a couple of temples, but not that one in Salt Lake. But the first one was in Ohio, Kirtland, Ohio. Now, if you look at that, it kind of looks a little more like a normal church. It's white. And there's a tower, and at the top, there is a dome. That's a specific type of architecture, dome. The dome goes back to this Athenian dome that's also there in Washington, D.C. But then they went to Nauvoo, and they also built this sort of white type of temple that looks a lot like the one in Kirtland with the dome. But that's it. Then they ran them out, and they murdered the prophet, and it's over. And then Brigham Young comes in, who is a Mason from the York Rite, just like we said the other day. Albert Pike came in, went through the York Rite. They made it up. And after they perfected the York Rite, that's what they really wanted people to learn. They didn't want them to learn the real mysteries. They turned everything upside down and backwards in the York Rite. And then he infiltrated the Scottish Rite, which are the good guys that Washington and Joseph Smith and all these people were. And they sort of redid it. And he built it, he did this book, Morals and Dogma, where they, spilled the beans about worshiping the devil and all this nasty, evil stuff, kind of like Aleister Crowley, right? And all the dark side. And then they started the Ku Klux Klan and the Democratic Party. Okay, we talked about all that. But, so Brigham Young does the same thing, takes over, murders the prophet, takes, I don't know, I think 16,000 people to Salt Lake City. Most of them, 60-some thousand people stayed in Illinois and never left and went with Brigham. They stayed with Emma Smith, who hated Brigham Young and said that he was an evil person. Joseph Smith said he would lead the church to hell. Anyway, I'm just trying to point out that when they got there, what did they do? Well, they reared this huge, massive temple in Salt Lake City, but it doesn't have the dome. It's a different architecture. What is it? Gothic, right? These Gothic Germanic castle thing. It's a castle thing. It doesn't look like a church. Not from the good line. It's the architecture from the bad side. Now, if you look at Chilago, it's the architecture from the good side. It's all white, right? The bad side's always black. They got ravens instead of doves, right? They're Gotham City, Batman. It's all black, right? Pale skin, and, because they're sucking people's blood, and they're evil, ruthless barbarians, and they got everything black. But the good guys, they got white cities, marble, and beautiful columns, and domes, and they also revere Egypt. Well, both sides can revere all this stuff because both sides comes from the Anunnaki originally, going back. Even if you trace your line back from the one son of Noah that ends up going up north, and Dan takes over that group and becomes the bad side, you're still going to go back to the Anunnaki. So they all revere people of Atlantis. It's just that when you get to Atlantis, you can go all the way back to Adam, Noah and Adam, that's the good side, or you can go back to Cain. Now, as we said the other day, these idiots today have no idea. They actually believe that there's an evil God, that's equal to the true deity. They can just choose which one they want, and they actually believe they're going to win this war with Jesus. They don't realize that the battle that we're really talking about, because they don't understand these mysteries, is the battle between good and evil within our own selves. Right? It's the battle between man and woman. We've got to come together and have a wedding. But anyway, I digress. Because, trust me, I know a lot of you think, okay, Dave, doesn't matter then. Each side is just an aspect of the mysteries. No, that's not true, because they've distorted the mysteries. The dark side has turned everything upside down. They got upside down crosses, and they are delusional. They don't understand the mysteries. That's Simon Magus, who Peter looked at and said, your heart is full of gall. You're a vile man. You think that by money you can purchase what is given by the grace of the Lord. And you thought you could get it with money, you idiot. No, I will not bestow upon you the right to lay upon thine hands, and whoever you lay your hands upon shall receive the Holy Spirit, O Simon Magus. Yeah, he was a magician. They were all, it's just because he was a magician and so was Jesus doesn't mean that magicians are bad, right? Moses was a magician, threw down his serpent, and it ate their serpent, those magic practicing priests. Daniel was the head of the Magi, so don't start thinking weird things. The point is that there are some priests that do not understand. They go, like in the movie Star Wars, they don't follow the Force. So they start, instead of conquering the darkness, they start loving the darkness, and they want to paint their bodies dark. They want to suck your blood, and they want to wipe out and genocide. They only know, they're blind. They think they're the only divine being that there is. There is no love. There is no mommy. There's no father. There's no son. There's no deity. It's just me. I am God, and there is none else. Get down and worship me. I am vengeance, and that is my name, jealous. That's what happens. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea. There's not, both sides are fine. You can't just decide which side you want to follow the dark side. That's your prerogative, No. Okay, stop it. Paul looked at that man up there in Cyprus that was claiming to be a follower of Jesus. And Paul said, you're the son of Satan. He claimed to be the son of Jesus. He says, no, you're not. You're the son of Satan. And he said it right to his face. And when the Sanhedrin, the high priest, was standing there harassing Paul looked up and said, may the Lord rebuke you. He didn't mess around. He didn't just say, well, you know what? Let's not argue. You got your ideas and opinions that Jesus didn't exist. Oh, Santos, well, yeah, I believe in Jesus, but not a real Jesus. Another Jesus, right? Yeah, there's no Paul, there's no Jesus, there's no Peter. Oh, Jesus and the devil's the same. Mr. Santos, you're dying. You look so void of life, and I wonder why. You must return to the Lord Jesus, Santos. I love you, brother. Come back to the fold. And please don't be teaching this blasphemy to these unsuspecting innocent ones. And Jeffrey Dahmer, I hope you'll come around too and accept the Lord. Because what you guys are doing is not something that can just be taken lightly. But let me get back to what I'm saying. So this architecture, we can tell by the architecture that it is not, all these buildings in New York, right, after the reset, by these evil fiends, are usually dark, and they're usually castle-like buildings, and, modern. They don't want to pattern anything after Monticello anymore, right? So that's one thing. But now here was this supposed city, Chilago, that they claim they just built in a few months. And, but for some reason, to have this World Fair, they bring this amazing statue from Egypt over, a monument, a real, not a plaster and sticks, but this ancient monument honoring one of the divine beings. And they place it right beside another statue that was given to them as a gift from France, from the good guys, from the ones who want liberty and justice and fraternity. And, there they are, and then they decided, I think in 1896, to burn down the statue. It was given to as a gift, one of the second largest statue in the world. It was like almost 100 feet tall. And they claim, it was just made out of plaster, Dave. So they just burned it down. I guarantee they didn't burn that down. It wasn't made out of plaster. It was probably, I don't know what they make them. I'm sure that there's boards and plaster underneath, but they're plated in copper and bronze and gold or whatever. These are real statues. I don't know the exact composition of these statues, like the Statue of Liberty, but you don't just burn it down. And something that, even if it was made out of plaster and sticks, think about the work that went into that statue. It was a gift from the French. And there was maps for 300 years called the Nova Francia and the Nova Scotia, right? And then you've got this New York, which is a whole different thing. The York, right up there in the 10 Germanic tribes, and the York rights, and the dark, and the Gothics, and it's totally different. You see what I'm saying here? So why then would they build this architecture of Athenian architecture and Egyptian architecture and display their new technologies and have this reset and say, well, the reason we're burning this down is because we're just showing you what we're going to do. This is just temporary. Okay, why'd they show us old architecture that they don't like anymore? And why does this gift that was given to us, the Statue of the Republic, why is it burned down? And why did they carefully take this monument, if it's just made out of plaster and it's not real? Why'd they take it down and take it to New York? And is there 2 statues in New York now then? Or monuments? One that they claim is one the Masons brought over on a ship where they had to put a hole in it, which is a ridiculous story. Or is that really the same one that was at Chilago that they moved? Because they said they took it. If you read the stories, back in 1893, they tell you what they did with that monument that was at Chilago. They took it to New York. So there's either 2 of them in New York, and I'll have to look into that because I didn't look into that, extensively before I did this video. Oh, and here comes another train. Man, I've had to shut this off 3 times because these trains are going by, guys. But I don't want that train I'll get right back to you. Okay, I think the train's in the distance enough now to where we can talk. But, I tell you, there's something going on with these trains. When I first 6 months, I didn't see, maybe a train would go by once an hour or something. Now they're going by every 10 minutes. It's just getting crazy. I think it's something to do with the diesel shortage or something. But anyway, yeah, wouldn't it be nice? I dream of having a studio where, I could shut the door and everything would be quiet and I have lighting and I could, be interviewed with people. But I don't have that. It's just me and the phone. I'm being shadow banned so bad that my videos won't even get out to the people anymore. It's like 1,500 of you are actually still watching. Thank you for you individuals that are still watching. And it's just that as time goes on, certain individuals that watch regularly end up dropping off, and then my watchers just going down. I think they're going to have me bottlenecked here pretty quick to where nobody will be watching. But anyway, I know the Lord is going to fix that, and I'm just trusting that whatever the Lord wants with this channel will be done. But for those of you who are watching, I hope that you understand that what we're talking about here is very important. We need some real proof. Now, you and I, we can look at those videos I did, and you can say, well, I believe that that city was there hundreds of years before they said it was. You can believe that. You can have strong convictions. But what I want to do is I want to show beyond a shadow of a doubt the truth. I want to expose these people. These lies have got to be exposed. Wherever they are found. And we've got to hold the line and help people understand that Jesus is real. And that our history is real. And that it does matter, what the Lord gave us. His creation is beautiful and it's divine. So, why would they then take this monument carefully down? They didn't burn it because it was something that was ancient. First of all, you couldn't burn it if it's stone, right? But why would they put that monument there beside a plaster temporary city? Why would they go through all the trouble to lift and hoist this? Must have weighed, I don't know how many tons, this huge stone monument with hieroglyphic writings on it, and haul it up there all the way to Chicago and stand it next to this temporary statue of the Republic. Well, they admit that the Statue of the Republic, was a gift given by the French. There's no way in your own mind, I don't think anybody could say, oh, well, yeah, the French fraternity, the Masons, the original Templars, they built that just to be temporary. They didn't mind that you went ahead and just burned it. Unless the Templars that made it, the same ones who made the Statue of Liberty, were the good guys. And I can prove that the reason they got rid of it is and they didn't want you to know that there are two lineal descendants of these individuals, that they took them over. And so what they do when they take over is they take symbols and turn them upside down, and sometimes they replace certain symbols to represent their people. So for instance, on this Statue of the Republic, I'm going to read you something about it that describes some symbolisms that are in it that they took away. They burned it, but they rebuilt it, a 25-foot one or something. And in that one, they made it exactly like the original, except they changed one symbol. And I'll show you what that symbol is. And that is very telling. They took the Phrygian hat that was at the pinnacle of that staff that it's holding in its hand. And at the very top of that staff, the original statue had a Phrygian cap. And I'll show you pictures of what that is here in a second. And they've taken that off. That's the only difference. And instead of the Phrygian cap, they put the laurel wreath. Now, it still says liberty on the plaque, but it's a different kind of liberty. Because the laurel wreath, as I've been telling you guys, represents victory and conquering and submission to their divine will. In other words, they're going to control you. That's what the wreath means. That's why they've got that wreath on the dollar bill and around everything, and the gold fringe around the flag and everything. It means their control. So they took off this Phrygian cap. Now, what's the Phrygian cap? Well, let me read you this. It says, the Statue of the Republic is a 24-foot high gilded bronze sculpture in Jackson Park, Chicago, Illinois, by Daniel Chester French. The colossal original statue, a centerpiece of the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893, was ordered to be destroyed by fire. The present statue is a smaller scale replica, sculpted by the same artist, which was erected in 1918. In commemoration of both the 25th anniversary of the exposition and the Illinois statehood centennial. Okay, so in 1918 they built this copy, a smaller scale replica. The statue is now located on the south end of the park at the intersection of East Hayes and South Richards Drive, adjacent the golf course and approximately where the exposition's administration building and electricity building once stood. The statue was funded by the Benjamin Ferguson Fund, which commissioned French to cast this recreation of the original 65-foot tall. Well, it was 65 foot tall, but it stood on a pedestal that was another several feet, so it was almost 100 feet tall. You know, like the Statue of Liberty itself is so many feet, but then it stands on a pedestal. So if you count the whole thing, it was almost 100 feet tall, this Statue of the Republic. Well, it stood on the grounds of the Exposition of 1893. Edith Minturn Stokes served as French's model for the original statue. Henry Bacon, wasn't this interesting, all these words, Bacon? And this guy's name is French. The guy named French builds the statue. What was the French that actually gave us the statue? And Henry Bacon, is that like Francis Bacon? France and Bacon? Of all these words, it's like they're coded. Okay, but the architect of the Lincoln Memorial, so he also made the Lincoln Memorial, the statue of President Lincoln, and designed the festooned pedestal for the replica statue. Now there is the Statue of the Republic. And you see in his right hand, there is a globe. Oh, the world's a globe. Even back in 1893. And on top of the globe is an eagle. All right, that's kind of apropos for these symbolisms, the eagle and the globe and all of that. In his left hand, you see this staff. It looks like a serpent winding up that staff. And at the top, there's a little plaque. It says Liberty. But around Liberty is this laurel wreath, which means the law. They will control this liberty with the law, their law, like Yahweh's law, Odan or Godan or Adonai, right? So that's what the replica looks like. And it's made out of bronze. But what did the original look like? Well, there's the original. Daniel Chester French, original statue, the Republic at the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893. Facing the administration building across the Great Basin. Ah, there's that baptismal basin, right? And at the other end's the dome. Just like Washington, D.C. This was made to be a capital of sorts. This is a temple. This isn't just some architecture, right? That's got all the paraphernalia you need if you're going to have an empire, right? There's the vagina, the woman's vulva on that dome. That's the woman's vulva. And then at the other end of the basin or the water course, like we have in Washington, D.C., is the Washington Monument. And so they had another one. They had one and it was real. They took it down, took it to New York. It was a real monument. We don't know. I don't know as of right now who it was dedicated to or where it came from, but I know it was a real monument or they wouldn't have took the trouble to take it to New York. They didn't burn it down. And then right next to this monument is this statue. But guess what? This version had a Phrygian cap draped on the staff. What is a Phrygian cap? All right, let's take a little look at that. What is a Phrygian cap? The Phrygian cap, or Liberty cap, is a soft conical cap with the apex bent over. See, there's the picture of it. It's kind of like a winter cap, like a snow cap, like Santa Claus wears. And it's associated in antiquity with several people in the Eastern Europe and Anatolia. Well, Anatolia is Turkey, and that's another word for Tartaria. All right, Wikipedia, Tartars. Yeah, that's Tartarian. Tartarians. The Tartars, an umbrella term for different Turkic, that's Turkey, ethnic groups bearing the name Tartar, initially ethnonym Tartar, possibly referred to the Tartar Confederation or the Tartarian Federation. That confederation was eventually incorporated into the Mongol Empire. That's why everybody's talking about the Mongols. When Genghis Khan unified various steppe tribes. Historically, the term Tartar or Tartars was applied to anyone originated from the vast northern and central Asian landmass then known as Tartary, a term which was also conflated with the Mongol Empire itself. But you see, it starts there in Turkey. The Tartarian Empire started there because that's where the Israelites went when they were taken captive. Up into Nineveh and the cities of the Medes and up at the headwaters of the Euphrates and Tigris in Assyria, in the northern Assyria. So there is where the Tartarians are, and it's also called Anatolia. Okay, for long portions of history, we called this Tartarian area Anatolia. And so the symbol of this Anatolian symbol on the top of the staff is a Tartarian symbol, my friends. And that is the 10 tribes that are lost, that went all over the world from China, Mongolia, all the way to America, Russia, everywhere in the world. The largest kingdom on earth, until the tribe of Dan, the Vikings, got here and massacred them and destroyed them, and they had a big war. And so this is where the Scythians, or the 10 tribes, went up into that area were in the Nineveh, at the north of the headwaters of the Tigris, in northern Assyria, and that area up around Syria, or Anatolia. And they went from there into the Baltic Sea and up into Europe, over the Caucasus Mountains, the Caucasians, and they spread out that way. Many of them went to Africa, over into Morocco. Many of them went different directions. Some of them went to Mongolia, became the people of the East. And they had Shintoism and Buddhism and all of that. They went all around the world. But a group of them went to Europe. And so this Anatolia was at that point, for a long period of time, was their capital. And they were the 10 tribes of Israel, including the Persians, the Medes, and the Scythians. All right, there's that word Scythians I was telling you about. Now, most people just want you to think Scythians is just another country. Where's the country of Scythia? Well, there is no country of Scythia. The Scythians are the people that inhabited the area of Anatolia and Persia and the Medes. Because remember, they took them into the cities of the Medes and the Persians. And Daniel went and became the magical highest of the chief of the magic practicing priests in Persia. So we know who they were. Why did Daniel go up there? Why was he appointed over them? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were governors of satraps because they were the children of Israel. Are you starting to see what I'm saying here? That Phrygian cap comes from the Anatolio and from the Scythians, who is the tribes of Israel. So, it says, they came to signify freedom and the pursuit of liberty, first in the American Revolution and then in the French Revolution. The original cap of liberty was the Roman pileus, the felt cap of emancipated slaves of ancient Rome, which was an attribute of libertas, the Roman deitress of liberty. In the 16th century, the Roman iconography of liberty was revived in emblem books and numismatic handbooks where the figure of Libertas is usually depicted with pileus. The most extensive use of headgear as a symbol of freedom in the first 2 centuries after the revival of the Roman iconography was made in the Netherlands, where the cap of liberty was adopted in the form of a contemporary hat. And in the 18th century, the traditional liberty cap was widely used in English prints, and from 1789 also in the French prints. By early 1790s, it was regularly used in the Phrygian form. But notice it's about liberty. But they took that off that statue in the replica, and they put the laurel wreath of control, which is completely the opposite of liberty. So they got liberty on a plaque with control, or the laurel wreath around it. Do you see what they're doing here? Do you see why they burned it down? They could not have the symbol of Israel, the good guys, and liberty, and the real Templars that go back to Mary Magdalene. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. It is used in the coat of arms, certain republics, or of a republican state. By the way, it's republican, not democracy. It was the republic, the Athenian republic, that went back to the priesthood, or basically it was theocracy. And a state institution in the place where otherwise a crown would be used, is thus came to be identified as a symbol of republican government. A number of, remember, we are a republic, guys, not a democracy. We are a republic. And we salute the flag and the republic for which it stands. A number of national personifications, in particular, France's Marianne. Oh, a number of national personifications. Who's this Marianne? Let's take a look at that. Marianne. Marianne, pronounced Marianne, has been the national personification of the French Republic since the French Revolution. Oh, she's the national personification of the French Republic, which, remember, the maps all say that the United States was called the New Francia and the New Scotia and Nova Francia. Now we call it the United States. It's like we're some kind of confederate with Britain or something, right? Remember the British, we fought a war with the British. We lost that war. Yes, we did. And then they changed our history so we didn't know. And they built Washington, D.C. But our capital used to be in this area up there in Chicago. Yeah. So, a personification of liberty, equality, fraternity, and reason, as well as a portrayal of the goddess of liberty. Who is the goddess of liberty? It's Mary. It's Mary Magdalene, friends, the wife of Jesus Christ. And there's her picture, a bust of Marianne. And Marianne is displayed in many places in France and holds a place of honor in town halls and law courts. She is depicted in the Triumph of the Republic, a bronze sculpture overlooking the Place de la Nation in Paris, as well as represented with another Parisian statue on the Place de la République. Her profile stands out on the official government logo of the country, appears on French euro coins and the French postage stamp. She was also featured on the former franc currency and is officially used on most government documents. Marianne is a significant Republican symbol. Her French monarchist equivalent is the Joan of Arc. As a national icon, Marianne represents opposition to monarchy and the championship of freedom and democracy against all forms of oppression. Okay, not a government of democracy, all right, but a Republican government where the people then are represented. Other national symbols of the Republican France include the tricolor flag, the national motto, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, the national anthem, La Marseillaise. Oh, La Marseillaise. Isn't that where Mary Magdalene really actually first came on the boat? Marseillaise, France. The coat of arms and the official Great Seal of France. Marianne also wore a cockade and a red Phrygian cap, symbolizing liberty. So that cap was worn by our Mother Mary. Now let me just take a look at this Martial, La Martial. La Martial is the national anthem of France. And the song was written in 1792 by Claude Joseph Roget de Lisle in Strasbourg after the declaration of war by France against Austria. Austria? The Germans? Oh, those dang Germans were fighting them the whole way. And it was originally titled Chant de guerre pour Armée du Rhin, the war song for the Army of the Rhine. Of course, they were in the Rhone. That's the Rhone River. From Marseille through Montpellier up to Paris is the Rhone River, where Peter Waldo owned 169 cities, towns, and villages. All of France. That's the nation. The French government was from Mary Magdalene until they drove them out and they massacred them in 1307. And then in 1492, they took Spain and they drove all the good people out of there. And then they went on their genocidal mission to wipe out the natives in America. And they evidently had a war with the pilgrims that were here who fought alongside the natives and took over Chalago, their capital. So there you go, friends. We probably don't have any more time to discuss this further. But in conclusion, what I'm trying to say is that if they went through all the trouble to burn that statue down that was given as a gift by the Freemasons, the original true ones, and then re-sculpt it, taking off the Phrygian cap of liberty that belonged to our Mother Mary, who, by the way, is the Statue of Liberty, is a depiction of Mary, Mother Liberty, and they didn't just like destroy the statue and make another, a picture of Odin or something. They couldn't do that. They had to deceive us. But they, behind the scenes, very quietly and cautiously, without anybody noticing, took that Phrygian cap off the staff that represents what we know now to be our Mother Mary and liberty and justice for all. And they put liberty, but encircled it with the laurel wreath, which is exactly what they did with our flag when they encircled it with the gold fringe. And they took that monument that was there at that temple at the other end of the basin or the baptismal font at that temple with that dome that was there, was not temporary. Can you really believe that they temporarily built the city to be a replica of a capital of the world? With the whole baptismal font and the dome and the pillar. But see, they don't tell people what that's all about. People go to Washington, D.C. today, and they don't realize that dome and that pillar represents the male and the female and this fertility, and it goes all the way back to the ancient mysteries. But they don't tell them that. Oh, we know it's mysterious, right? It's on the dollar bill, the pyramid, and all this stuff. But nobody understands that the evil Illuminati massacred in 1307 the people who were the knights that Mary Magdalene brought over on the boat, and that after they were massacred there, they went then to Britain, America, and sailed to America, and they built Chalago, and that was the capital. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and go, guys. Hope you have a wonderful day. May the Lord bless you. Have a good one.